Now say, hey, this is Conor, this week at IESE Business School, and here with my good friend John Zimmer, who's here with me this week to help work with the Leadership Communications program with the Executive MBA. And we thought we'd gather together this Friday here in one of the classrooms here at IESE and answer some of the most common questions that we get from the participants during this week here teaching leadership communications. So John, what are some of the questions that you hear regularly as we teach people how to use words, gestures, passion to achieve change in the world?
Well, after 7 years working on this great program with you and the others, some questions tend to repeat themselves. One of the ones that comes up is, why do I have to crystallize my message into 8 words? When we teach, we have the students prepare speeches, and one of the things we insist on is that they are able to condense, distill their message down into 8 words. And they say, but there's so much more to know. And the reason is that it is critical that a speaker get clear in his or her mind what the key message is for the audience. So many times I've been in the audience listening to presentations, and I suspect you've had the same experience, Conor, and you, after a while you ask yourself, where is she going with this? What's his point? And so by distilling your message down into 8 words, it helps get clear in your mind what you want to get across to your people. And once you have that message, then as you start to build it out, adding a statistic, a story, a slide, a graph, a chart, whatever, just ask yourself, does it support the message? And if it does, it can stay. And if it doesn't, maybe you save that for another time.
Yeah, clarity. We're very serious about clarity. I remember one year a vice president of Microsoft came and he said, if you cannot clearly explain the problem, the audience thinks you are the problem. And here, we force people to get their message down 8 words or less. 8 words or less. If you can state something clearly in 8 words, then we can trust that the rest of things will come together.
Wasn't it Einstein who said, if you can't explain it simply, you don't understand it well enough?
Clarity.
How about you? What's a question that you've often received over the years?
How does this work out there in business? We do a lot of work, one person speaking to a group of 16, one person speaking to a group of 70. And for a lot of the business people, their question is, how do I take this back into my day-to-day? I don't give that many public speeches where I stand up in front of an audience. And I think what I would answer is, number one, the way we prepare here, the way we get clear about what it is that is your position, what it is that you want from other people. Even just that process of getting clear on who the other is, what you want from them, why they would choose to give it to you, will put you in a good place for meetings, for one-on-one, for speaking with the people that do have resources. I think also what I would say is, for an hour-long meeting, very often what you need at the very beginning of the meeting is a 3-minute little persuasive speech where you capture the attention of the people in the room to state why I want another 57 minutes of your time. So it may be that a lot of the time in the meeting will be spent informing, but at the beginning I've got to persuade you not just to physically be in this room, but bring yourself mentally into this room.
It's amazing how if people just put a little more time and thought into preparing, whether it's for a meeting or a speech or a presentation, even if it's 2 or 3 days before, you just close the office door, you turn off the phone, and you sit there with pen and paper in hand, and for half an hour, 45 minutes, you sketch out, what's my objective? What do I hope to achieve? What do I want to get across? Why should they care? Because you can have the best message in the world, but if the audience, if you can't come up with at least one reason why the audience should care, you may be speaking to the wrong audience or giving the wrong message.
And I remember I spent my first 10 years of my career at a company called Accenture. And at Accenture, I remember my idea of preparing a presentation was I opened up PowerPoint and I spent all the time until minutes before the meeting in PowerPoint, and I only closed PowerPoint to have enough time to print the slides, so that I had them not only on the screen but printed out. I spent no time thinking about how I wanted to come across. And the problem in business is not the PowerPoint that gets promoted. It's not the PowerPoint that gets a salary raise for doing a good job. It's you. And if you put more work in making sure that your PowerPoint is better than you, your PowerPoint is what is going to be taken onto the board. Your PowerPoint is what is going to be promoted. You know, when we think about how much a professional musician practices a piece. So, a friend of my family, Barry Douglas, if he was to play Beethoven's Fifth Symphony in front of the Palau de la Musica for 3 months, 4 hours a day, he's with those notes, he's practicing, he's looking at how he conveys it out to the audience. With a lot of our speeches, number one, Beethoven didn't write the speech, so it's an even harder thing. Barry Douglas at least starts knowing that the script is a great script. Very often in our preparation, we don't know if we have great scripts, we've got to work on that. We don't know if we can put our energy, our passion, engage with others in a way that brings a good script to life. And I do think it is scary how much more work goes into making PowerPoint beautiful than making the way I come across beautiful.
PowerPoint is great, Keynote is great, but PowerPoint is a tool, and like any tool, you have to use it for the right job, at the right time, and in the right way. If I gave you a shovel and I asked you to dig a ditch from left to right, and you took the shovel and you flipped it around and you were sticking the handle in, you'd dig a lousy ditch, but it's not the shovel's fault, it's how you used it. And too many people, unfortunately, they use PowerPoint the wrong way. What you said about your musician friend reminds me of a great metaphor for me for a really great speech or presentation, and that's an iceberg. You're familiar with the expression, the tip of the iceberg. Most of the iceberg is hidden underneath the water. That's why they're so dangerous, because ships can't see just how vast they are. The tip of the iceberg is just a little part of something bigger. And I like it as a metaphor for a great speech or presentation, because what the audience sees, that's the tip. But what they don't see is all of the preparation that went into it, all of the hours and hours that your friend practiced to get that Beethoven speech just right for that occasion.
I think also sometimes the metaphor of a swan. Over the surface of the water, much like the tip of the iceberg, you see a graceful bird. If you look underneath the water, what you see are two little legs paddling like crazy. And I think very often a great speaker makes it look so easy. And to a novice audience, to an audience of amateurs, they think, well, if it's that easy, I should just be able to do it. Barry Douglas makes playing the piano look easy, but he does it because he's put years and years and years into practicing and making it just seem that it comes naturally out of him.
Now we have to come up with a metaphor of a swan on top of an iceberg. Moving along.
I'm sure Game of Thrones has the frozen swan.
Another question I get a lot from students is, what is one thing that I can do on stage to be a better speaker? Just one thing. And what always comes to mind for me is become comfortable with pauses. The pause is so important when it comes to speaking. And novice speakers, people who are not used to it, typically will go fast because they're a bit nervous, the adrenaline is flowing, and they want to get their ideas out. So it's understandable. It's also understandable that if I say something and pause, often in my mind, if I'm not experienced, I'll be thinking, oh my God, everyone's looking at me. I can feel my heart beating. They think I've forgotten. But the audience can't hear your heart beating. The audience is going to look at you whether you're speaking or not, because you're the one up on stage. And they're not thinking that you've forgotten something. I mean, unless your pause is 30 seconds, then maybe. But if you pause for a few seconds, what's happening is that you are giving the audience a chance to think about what you just said and make it relevant to them. Because so often, you may be giving this presentation for the 15th time, or you may have been working on this for weeks and weeks. You know it so well that you forget what it was like when you knew nothing about your topic. And whatever you're speaking about, there was a time when you knew nothing about it. And perhaps there are some in your audience who are not who are at that stage. They don't know anything about your topic, or they don't know as much as you do. So they need that extra time to think about what you've said and make it relevant to them. And the speakers who pause, they just look better on stage. They look more confident and more compelling.
Well, I think that there's two distinct modes of speaking with another person. One is dialogue. I'm here, you're here, we're having a conversation. And if I make a pause, it's an invitation for you to step in with your idea. Speaking where I have the focus, where it's not really a conversation, not a dialogue, there's 100 people or 1,000 people or 20 people, and sometimes even one-on-one. There's a mode where I actually have the limelight on me. It's not a dialogue. The problem for most of the candidates that we have this week is they have 99.9% of their practice of communication is in a dialogue. If I pause for a moment, the other person will jump in and take over. And you've got to make a switch to the format of, I now have your attention. A pause from this perspective is not one where I hand back the attention. A pause is now where I allow the audience in their minds to deeply understand or deeply visualize what I'm sharing. And it's an act of great power when you do have the attention to pause, to let the others catch up, to let their minds visualize from different directions what it is that you're sharing. But I think there's two distinct modes of communication, and most people have spent most of their life in a mode of dialogue. A pause is a dangerous moment.
And it's also why you often see people on stage, we tell people, try and reduce your filler words, your ums, your so's. And I read an interesting article years ago. Psychologists say that part of the reason we say or whatever is because, like you say, most of our conversation is dialogue. So if I'm telling you about a great trip I had, and I say, well, we went down to the beach, and I continue, the is a subconscious signal, and a vocal signal, subconscious to me, but vocal to you, that I'm still occupying the space. I still have more to say. And the thing is, when 90%, 99% of your conversation is dialogue, it's not a surprise that when you come up on stage, those uhs and ums are going to fill in. And if you can replace those with pauses, it's much more powerful.
I was listening this morning to a psychologist, Jordan Peterson. His videos are all over YouTube. And he talked about the moment where in his life he left behind being weak and he became strong. And he said he just decided to stop doing and saying all of the things that reduced his power, that conveyed weakness. And the filler words, the lack of confidence, all the body language that shows that I feel inferior, he just decided. It didn't mean that immediately it was removed. I think perhaps what happens during this week with so much feedback, so much getting up and seeing how others are impacted by your words, it strikes you how much collected behaviors, whether vocal or gestures or eye contact, that make you weak.
Mm-hmm. And you know what one of the biggest is? This reminds me, when people
makes you look weak.
Make you look weak.
And I think that there's a thing here, you can be strong but look weak. Aristotle, when he talked about ethos is not something that the speaker owns.
It's from the audience's perspective.
It's perception.
It's how the audience perceives you. If the audience perceives you as being weak, as I'm a lawyer, and one of the most famous maxims in the law is justice must not only be done, it must be seen to be done. The public needs to have faith in the justice system, and similarly, your audience needs to have faith in you. And similar to the ums and the uhs and all these other things that people do that weaken their ethos, typically, I often see novice speakers have sentences go up at the ends of the sentences, the voice rises, and we think this is a good idea, and we really hope you agree with us, and we should really move forward. And that is something, if you pay attention, you will see this more often than you think. And if you're making a statement, I tell people your voice should come down. This is a good idea. We should move forward with this investment. Because the reality is, if you don't sound invested in what you are presenting to me, the chances that I'm going to feel invested are greatly diminished. But if you sound like you fully believe in this, I've got a better chance of getting on board with you. At the very least, I will believe that you have the conviction of your words. So speak with conviction. At the ends of those sentences, when you're making a statement, the voice should come down.
And do you think people have learnt these habits of weakness by accident, or they are actually weak?
I think for some, on a planet of 7 billion people, some of course are going to be weak, but I also do think there's a lot of this social conditioning. People, especially at a young age, they start to talk like this because it's cool and it's kind of hip, and the voice goes up. And again, it becomes a habit. It becomes a habit that you bring with you up on stage. And like you were saying, it doesn't help. It doesn't help your ethos.
It may well be that, in a scary way, your time in school, your time at university is not typically spent around adult role models of leadership. Teachers in school, maybe if we were to go back 50, 80 years in Ireland, the smartest people went into teaching after they studied. Today, salaries are much higher in banking, much higher in consulting. Where do the assertive, authoritarian people that have a capacity to assert their will go? They don't end up in classrooms. So, to me, I was thinking that we learn by watching people around us. And through your years of school, through your years of university, in junior ranks in an organization, it's possible that all the role models that you have around you model habits of weak people. They don't have power, they don't have a strength within of knowing what they stand for, what is acceptable, what is not acceptable. They are what we call company men, the grey area of John, those that submit to a system. They rebel against the system, but the system is what they look to for comfort and for certainty. And perhaps I worry, maybe the power of YouTube is we can start to see, as young people, models of how someone who is not just cruel, has integrated the strength of goodness, but also knows that in this world sometimes you need to assert your will in order to achieve a good end.
And if you're now asking yourself, well, gee, I wonder, do I speak like that? Do I run on? I'll give you two pieces of advice that can help. First is the next time you have a speech or presentation, have somebody video it. It's a painful process to watch yourself on video. I still hate it. After all these years, I still don't like watching myself on video. But if you video yourself, I recommend that you use the video in 3 ways. First, play it, but don't watch it. Just listen. It forces you to focus on your voice. The rate at which you're speaking, are you pausing enough? Is your voice going up or is it coming down? Tone, these kinds of things. The second way, play it again, turn the volume off. Now you have to just watch. Gestures, body movement. Are you swaying back and forth? Are you smiling? Are you looking at the audience, or are you looking down or up or out the window or wherever? And then the third way, put it together. So that's one tip. Second tip, I always tell people, especially in organizations, be proactive in seeking feedback. And what I mean by that is, if you have a presentation coming up and you know a colleague who will be there, ask that colleague before the presentation, listen, I've been told I speak too fast and I don't pause enough. I'd really appreciate it if you watched out for those 2 things, my speed and my pauses. Because often I ask clients in big organizations, do you get feedback from a presentation? And they say, yeah, and I said, what do people say? They said, oh, it was great. Because people feel, oh, I don't want to either get into it or I don't want to offend a person, so how's my presentation? It was great. It was great doesn't help you. It doesn't help you grow at all. But what I've found is that if you give people the permission beforehand to look for something specific, they're going to be much more willing to share feedback that is actually meaningful.
I think on feedback, one of the patterns that I see repeatedly when we teach for a week is nothing impacts growth more than one, doing, sitting down, and then hearing your peers tell you what you did well and tell you where you could have had a greater impact. And very often the first time you sit down, you don't need to hear what you could have done better. You know full well, which is sort of scary how little we practice the things that matter in life. You know, if you think once you're done with school, what homework do you have? And I would say your success in life will be how much homework you choose to do on the skills, on the knowledge that you should be a master of. If you assume that your company, or just by accident in your environment, you will become good at what you need to be good at, you will know the facts and the knowledge that you need to know in order to progress, you're not going to progress, or there's going to be others that will step in and have an accelerated growth. So this process of feedback, I believe human beings, we are moved by two things, pleasure and pain. But changes in our lives don't come because of pleasure.
No.
You know, we fantasize, but it's really the pain that causes the change.
Exactly.
And you know, if I'm playing a role as a coach, what I will do to encourage change now in an individual is look to bring the pain of the future back here. If you continue to behave the way you're behaving right now, where are you going to be in 5 years, in 10 years? What are you going to lose? And if I can bring back all that pain and put it here and let you look that this behavior that you think is non-consequential today, continued over days, weeks, months, for years, is going to have a serious catastrophic impact.
Absolutely.
And I find it is so hard to receive the painful feedback, but it is so important to receive the painful feedback. And I've noted every person who has been with Toastmasters for more than a year becomes so receptive to feedback. You know, tell me about how feedback works in your room.
Well, in here at IESE, so during the week we have 4 days. We have one day where we have the whole group together, and then we have 4 consecutive days where the groups are broken into smaller groups. And each day, each group, half of the group gets to present. So after 2 days, everybody is presented once, and then the final 2 days, they have to give a second speech. After each speech, like Conor said, I go around the room, I moderate. First thing I say is, yes, I'm the professor in the room, but I just have one opinion. And when you speak to an audience of 15 or 1,500, everybody has an opinion. And so I go around the room, what do we like? And I get the people who speak, then they get the perspectives from their classmates. And sometimes, it's interesting, sometimes 2 people have a different point of view on something. That's something about feedback. Not everybody is going to take everything you say in exactly the same way. You have to be open enough. I tell people, for today, assume that everything that has been said is correct. Take it all in, don't judge it, don't question it, just take it in, and then think about it and apply it to you. You know, ask yourself after, should I try this? We go through the first set of speeches. On the second set of speech, everybody comes up. The first thing I say to them, what are you going to work on in this speech? And I'm very pleased when everybody says, I'm going to work on A, B, and C. And I check my notes from the first speech, and this is exactly the things that we said. And, you know, like you said, feedback is not always easy to hear, but once you get used to hearing it and receiving it, you start to realize this is a good thing. It's like going to the gym when you don't feel like going. My best workouts are when I feel just tired and I don't want to go, and then I just drag my sorry butt into the gym and go, and when I'm done, I feel better because I pushed through the difficult part. And you know, you're so right about you will learn a lot more from your negative experiences than the positive ones. And a really simple exercise for people is to think of, you know, from your work or personal life, think of a time you had a great success. Now write down everything you learned. Now think of a time you really screwed up, you made a mistake, things went really bad. I'm willing to bet that the list of things you learn is going to be longer in the second.
And I guess success is probably fruit of something that has been done in the past. Failure tends to be, we can look into this moment.
Right.
But you know, in terms of feedback, very often, unless you specifically ask for it, you're going to get bland positives, and any negatives will avoid really touching on the elephant in the room. So, here, you, Florian, Tobias, Tony, myself, we don't let people get away with bland, negative feedback. We want constructive feedback.
Yes.
Florian talks about plus. It's not that what they did was bad. So let's take what we've just seen. How do we make it better?
Exactly.
And what are the ways that one can get that type of feedback for themselves in a work environment?
I think, again, whenever I've been in a position of leadership at work, you often have regular team meetings, and especially on the first meeting, when I'm meeting a team for the first time, I will say, I want you to tell me where I'm going wrong. I think teams function a whole lot better when people see that the leader is willing to be open to receiving this feedback as well. I will sometimes, in the past, I've sat down with employees one-on-one, and I say, especially when I'm giving feedback to them on how they did on a job, that's my role, and I give that feedback, and then I start to say, now, what do you think about me? Were my instructions clear? Was there anything I could have done better to help you? And I just think that it comes back to this whole theme of being open to receiving feedback, to not thinking of it as an attack, to not thinking that somebody's got it in for you. If one of the things that I do is I'm a member of an improv group in Geneva, and I absolutely love doing improvisation. I've been doing it for about 7-8 years now. We perform shows, we do workshops for corporate clients, and one of the key things about improv is that everybody has everybody else's back. You always look out for your partners, and part of looking out for your colleagues at work, the members of your team, is to let them know when they might be going a little bit off path, and also for you to be open to saying, hey, what specifically am I doing or not doing that if I change would be better, not just for me, but for everyone as well? Have you had that experience?
Well, there's a book, Crucial Conversations, which talks exactly about what needs to be in place in order to have that conversation.
Yeah.
So, between you and me, there's confidence, there's safety. I think I trust that whatever you're giving to me is for my long-term good. And I'm willing to accept short-term pain, knowing that John sees what I want to achieve in life. I guess there's a balance here of what's more important to me, my feelings in this moment or my growth in the long term. And if I want to look good, and it's more important to think that I look good than it is to grow, I'm going to be very resistant to receiving feedback. I think there's almost a natural human tendency to really, I want to be right. I want to feel good. I don't like, the person that challenges me, I dislike, not because they're not helping me grow, but because I'm forced to see something that doesn't meet my image of feeling right, of feeling good.
The ego is a powerful thing.
Yeah.
The ego is a powerful thing, and you've got to be able to tell the ego, yes, you're a good person, you've got great qualities, just sit over there now and just be quiet for a while. And listen.
But I guess learning to not react.
Yeah.
And a lot of what we will be doing during this week is being quite harsh and direct and triggering a fright reaction or panic reaction, and training that you can overcome that fright reaction.
Yes.
If someone is determined to give you some good feedback and they're junior to you and this could really help, they are very aware of all the signals on your face, on your body, of whether you really are open to this. Yeah. And I think this question of how do you allow your environment to give you these lessons before they lead to the epic fail. And I think it's tiny. First it's the mindset. I would rather pain today that leads to growth and a better tomorrow than feel good today but be stuck in repeating the same bad thing until the environment disappears.
You want to know one of my favorite tools, not just for this, but for many things in life, and you can use this to prep yourself to receive feedback in the right way, is the bathroom mirror, or any mirror. If you're going into a session where you're going to ask for feedback, just go into the bathroom privately, just look at the person in the mirror. You could fool the entire world, your whole life, but there's one person you cannot fool, and that's the face that stares back at you from the mirror. and just ask yourself, do I want to be better? Am I willing to accept the feedback I get and to think about it? At the very least, not to judge it immediately, but to think about it and reflect on it. It's a powerful exercise. It's not always easy to look oneself in the mirror that openly and that honestly. But if you do that before a session, just take 30 seconds and then go in. I think it will help you be a lot more receptive to receiving that feedback.
So back to questions that we receive during this week. Any others that come to mind?
A common one is, should I use notes? Should I use notes? And different people have different philosophies about notes. Some people say, yes, bring everything up, and some people say, if I catch you with a single shred of paper, I will rip it out of your hands. My view is this. If you have a long presentation, or short presentation, whatever, clearly, if you can do it without notes, it's much more effective. Because people make a mistake of having notes that are too detailed, and they get sucked into it. It's like a black hole. They've just come up with the first picture of the black hole. This is what notes are. They're a black hole, and they draw your attention down. If you're going to have notes, it's fine, but first of all, type them. Second of all, big font, 24-point font. Notes are for you. They're not going to be distributed, so don't have messy handwriting. Have big, clear font print that you can actually read while standing up. You just glance, and it's there. Thirdly, just key points, a key word or two. You don't have to know. First, you should never memorize a speech or presentation. What you should know is that I want to go from point A to B to C to D. And if I give that speech or presentation 5 times, the words will be different each of the 5 times, but I will still cover A, B, C, D. So a note should be just a quick check to say, am I on course? Great. Next point is market opportunity. Great. Now I'm going to talk about market opportunity. Because over the many years of corporate trainings that I've done, the thing I consistently discover is that people know more than they think they know. I will have people come to the front and they will have a PowerPoint slide that is just the most god-awful thing you've ever seen. It's complicated, there's paragraphs of writing, and I will calmly walk up beside them, I will blank the screen, and I'll say, computer just broke. Give us the information without the slide. And they always do it better. They get to the point quicker, it's clearer, and their colleagues say, that was much better. That was much better. So if you need notes, simple notes that are just a quick check, and then you get back to being engaged with the audience.
Again, I think it goes to the element of ethos. The question of the notes is about what impact it has on another group of people. And the impact of me taking out paper is, this wasn't important enough for me to actually do the work to learn and reduce down to what's simple. There are times where notes can actually convey that this is so important. So, why we're so strict on gestures, on voice, on and M, they have a huge impact on how others perceive you. I think, there today, as we're getting further along in this course, people are saying that if you bring up an object, you're bringing it up because it's adding to the impact that you want to have. So notes were, I'm giving the quote and I say Martin Luther King, and I've brought the act of taking it out is showing how important this quote is to me. I carry it with me. Yeah. The need to memorize it is, you're asking me for your commitment and you haven't done the work to just keep it simple and memorize. I think another distinction is there's persuasion. I have done the work, so I can now ask for you to give me resources. Then there's informing. And in the role of informing, I think then you can have notes. We're going to go through 25 different points, but I've already persuaded you that this information is going to be valuable to you, that you giving me the time is going to be a useful thing for you. But that's a different use of notes.
It's a different use.
Here we're very focused on 3 minutes, and every action in those 3 minutes, we want you to be conscious and intentional about why it's there. And a lot of the beginning of this week is discovering how much unconscious gestures, unconscious words, fillers, noise are entering in. And if you can just clean that out, the impact you can have goes up by 100.
I tell people when you have to present, don't think of yourself as a speaker, think of yourself as a sculptor. What does a sculptor add? What did Michelangelo add to the marble to make it the David? It's what he took away. And so whether it's reducing text on a slide, whether it's cutting out the filler words, when it's this this process of reducing, anybody can make it takes no special skill to make something more complicated. Anybody can do that, but to really take out what is extraneous, what is not necessary, and get to the heart of it, it takes work, it takes effort, but the reward is that much greater.
So what else would you recommend for the participants completing this program? What other things that can they be doing individually or out in the world to continue this path of growth?
I like the metaphor of a path of growth, because it's not like we go through this week, intensive though it may be, and at the end we flick on a switch and everybody is Barack Obama or Margaret Thatcher. No, it doesn't work that way. It is a lifelong journey. One thing that I tell all of my students is that if you are serious about becoming a better speaker, seize every opportunity you can to speak. We sit at tables of about 8 or 10 people for lunch in a big room, and sometimes somebody says something and I will tell them, I will say, "That's fantastic. Stand up right now and give a 1-minute speech to the entire room." And they're in the middle of this restaurant. No, I can't. And then the table starts clapping. Then they get up and everybody cheers. And they speak for a minute. Of course it's unpolished and it's rough. But when they sit down, I say, you know what? You now have 1 minute more experience speaking in front of 50, 60 people than you had 60 seconds ago. It's a cumulative process. So whether it's saying something at a meeting, or giving a toast to a colleague who's leaving at a restaurant, or asking if you can do a presentation, the more opportunities you have to speak, the better you are going to become. If you want to be a good hockey player, I need to bring the Canadian element into this. Go Leafs, go. You have to play hockey. If you want to be a good writer, you have to write. If you want to be a good speaker, you have to speak. And I know you are a very big fan, and I learned this from you many years ago, just turning on the camera on your computer. Switch on the video and speak to the camera for 2-3 minutes, and then watch yourself back. It makes a difference.
And I like your thing of watch, just listen to the words, just watch how the gestures and the movement, and then see how they come together. Because the impact is not just words, the impact is not just movement, it is how they come together. But isolating words, where am I weakening my impact with poor use of words? Where am I weakening my impact with poor use of gestures or poor extra stuff that is just being in there as noise? In a way, sometimes I think if you could just clear out all the noise and simplify down to the core, that would be far more impactful than spending any more extra time on coming up with beautiful words.
What else do I tell them? I've often found, and I suspect you've seen this over the years as well, when people are getting towards the end of the presentation, there is a tendency to accelerate. And so we can just get off the stage because it's done. Have you found that as well?
Well, here, maybe one comment would be on stage and acting, and perhaps a question that does come up. We often push people to be bigger versions, or use dialogue and be the two characters. And a question that there would be is, how much is too much acting, or I don't feel right acting.
I always push people in a training to go beyond where they're comfortable at. If we imagine on a scale of 0 to 10, where 10 is over the top, crazy, jumping up and down, and 0, you're dead in terms of interaction, engagement with an audience. I'd say the bulk of people when they start out are in the 2, 3, 4 range. And I will have them, example, people who speak very softly. I will, when there's, we tell them, you could speak louder, it's going to be better. I'll ask the audience, on a scale of 1 to 10, what was that? And so I'll be 3, 4, 5. I said, that's great. They said 4 on average. I want to hear a 7. And so now they're speaking a bit louder. Sometimes they have to push. And then sometimes I'll push them to 10. I've even gone outside of the room and I tell them, I say, I want to hear you speaking through the door. And so by the end, they're just yelling. And then people are cheering and I come back in and I say, okay. And they ask me, yeah, I'm never going to speak like that out in the real world. And I say, of course not. But the thing is, if you can go to 10 here, maybe out there you'll say, hey, I can do a 6, I can do a 7. It's not about acting, it's about being yourself, but sometimes you have to be a little bigger version of yourself. And I think people have this too many people have this fixed image of, I'm this person, and it's very linear, but you actually have a range. Mm-hmm. You can be soft, you can be angered, you can be happy with friends. And it's about being yourself, but being yourself and bringing that up on stage. If, as an example, like I said, people who I've lost my thought.
Yeah.
It happens.
It happens. So you just do a good gesture.
You just do a good gesture. Yeah. It's about being yourself, but when you're speaking, for example, to a group of 500 people, you got to be a little bit bigger. You got to gesture more grandly, because otherwise the effect is not going to be the same.
Well, there's an element that what we're doing here is like a gymnasium. And the movements that I do in my physical gym are not movements that I do in the gym and then I come into the office and I go, John, really great to see you today. Yeah. That's a movement in a gym that gives me more strength, gives me the capacity to do other things out in the world. And if something did fall down on top of us, maybe I could save us.
Listen, you go to the gym not because you're going to be lifting, weights in the real world. You go to the gym so that you can lift up your suitcase and load it up on the top shelf of the plane.
And I guess there's this inner guide of what I'm comfortable with. The question, who chose what you're comfortable with? Because I think in many cases when people come here and they resist doing the louder voice, they resist being expansive gestures, they say, that's just not who I am. For me, someone at 30 years old saying, that's not who I am. Someone who has decided that somehow accidentally over these 20, 25, 30 years through school and university, I have now been crafted as a being, and I'm going to just coast on using the person who is, and that's who I'm going to be. Yeah. But it's such a common resistance.
Very common. People form these impressions of themselves, and they think that's it, from here to the end. Mm-hmm. But life, if life stops being a journey of growth and change and evolution, that's when you run into problems. Mm-hmm. And the people who say, I can't speak loudly or whatever, put them in Camp Nou Stadium when Barcelona's playing, you got 100,000 people going mad. Then you'll see a different person. Yeah. But it's still them. It's a different version of themselves. And, when it comes to how you act on stage or how you design your slides or whatever, I think in large part, people do things in a certain way because that's the only way they've seen others do them. And so they start to think, well, if everybody does it this way, I have to do it this way. But there's room for creativity. And what I found is that when people are willing to do things a little bit differently, for example, not have a title slide, just come up and just have the screen black and just start talking, telling a story, and then click into your first slide. It's a simple thing, but people do this, and because it's done so infrequently, the reaction is, wow, that was great how you did that.
And I guess if you look at architects, if you want to build a square building with windows that you can buy in a standard issue building supplies company, you're not going to have people loving the building, but equally you're not going to have haters. And I suspect Gaudi building Sagrada Familia, there's a lot of lovers, but there's some haters. Yep. The Guggenheim
in Bilbao.
it has transformed a city because it is so different.
Yeah.
But I guarantee there were some haters, there were some people very angry. And I think, by sitting in the middle, what you avoid is anyone loving you for the guarantee that no one hates you.
Exactly.
And it's
Playing it
a
safe.
huge price to decide to pay, that I'm going to avoid the opportunity of 90% of the world to love me, to be inspired by me, to avoid the 1, 2, 3, 5%
Yeah.
critics who will throw stones and point out flaws. And scarily, the first time you really impress is probably when these are going to come. The hyenas will arrive.
Yep.
And there'll be something in their points. And I think then it comes back to this taking of feedback. If mindset is, I want to feel comfortable, safe and secure, then I'm going to come back into my shell.
Yes.
If my mindset is, this is a lifelong path of growth, the human condition is a wonderful opportunity to learn new things every day, that to be surprised by the world, to be curious and look forward to things that surprise you, people doing things that were unpredictable. And each day of growth, that mindset will allow you to expand.
Yeah.
That mindset will also allow you to not hate your haters, but to see them as almost more powerful than your lovers, in that they will pick apart any remaining flaws. And if you can listen to those haters, they're the ones that are most going to be able to help you take the next stage. And I think anything that shakes the world creates some that are with and some that are against.
Well, you look at great inventions, great people through history. I mean, many of them were reviled. They were criticized, some were in prison, but these were the ones who made the change. And you're right. If you try and play for that safe spot in the middle, I always say that it doesn't really matter if people are saying good things about you or bad things about you. The time to worry is when they're saying nothing about you. And
well, I would say, they say the opposite of love
yes,
is not hate.
it's indifference.
It's apathy,
Apathy,
indifference.
yeah.
It's being irrelevant.
Yes.
And, scarily, at 30, 35 years old, so many people come in and rather than stand out, they want to tone down and be small.
Yeah. Yeah.
And a large part of speaking well begins inside with the mindset.
Being willing to accept the fact that if you speak to a room of 50 people, that there may be 3, 4, 5 people who don't like what you say. I remember once, years ago, I was speaking to a room of about 80 communications professionals from different companies and organizations in Geneva, Switzerland, where I live. And I was going through the presentation. First of all, I went into it very nervous and stressed because I was speaking about really good presentation skills to a room full of people who their whole job is presenting and communicating. So I had to get really creative about this. So I'd worked on this for a long time. And I was talking about the impact that an image can make. How, yes, you have data and a couple of bullet points here and there on slides, but images make an amazing impact. And in my previous life, I worked in the United Nations system, and I had some incredible experiences in the Middle East and Africa and elsewhere. And I showed a full screen image of me when I was doing some work in Kenya in a refugee camp. And I remember there were these just beautiful, beautiful little children, and it was just so heartbreaking to see them in these conditions. And I have a picture with them, which means a lot to me. I mean, I remember, like, back in the hotel that night, I remember crying in the hotel. I felt so bad for these kids and what they had to go up with. But the image, when I showed it to this group, 80 people, 79 people thought this was an amazing image of me with these kids. There was this one woman who let out this audible, here's the Western white man coming in to save the developing world, which was not my intention at all. Mm-hmm. And I just remember, it was like the entire room went black, and there was this spotlight on this woman. And for 10, 12 seconds, I couldn't say, like, the words. I was trying to struggle with the words.
Yeah.
And then I got back on my footing, and I went back, and it was very successful. But that really shook me. It bothered me for about a week. And then at the end of a week, I remember, again, I was still thinking about this, and I thought, you know what? If I'm going to be doing this, if I'm going to be speaking, I have to accept that there are going to be people who disagree with what I do or a part of what I do who will challenge me. And if I try and come up with something that is perfect for everyone, it's going to be some soft, doughy pap that nobody wants. And I thought, no, I got to go in with the very best of intentions. And I put it out there, and you let the chips fall where they may.
I think they say marketing. Great marketing has two aims: attract those you want, repel those you don't want.
Yeah.
And I think if you want anyone in your team, you will attract mediocrity.
Yeah.
If you set high standards, you'll repel some
Of
people,
course.
but you'll attract the ones you want.
Yeah. People who try to be all things to everyone usually end up being nothing to anyone. And Seth Godin, whose blog, he's one of the only blogs that I have delivered to my inbox. He talks about, don't try and make something for everyone, because nobody's going to want it. All you need is a tribe, a small group of people who care about what you do. Right? There are 7 billion people on the planet. If you had a group of people, if you had 10,000 people, 10,000 true followers, as Kevin Kelly talks about, having a true follower, that's massive. The impact you can have is massive.
So on that note,
Good place to
don't
end.
go for 7 billion fans.
Go for
Get 1,000. And
Get
if that 1,000
1,000.
can get to 10,000, you can make enormous change in
Absolutely,
this world.
absolutely. Good luck
John,
with your speaking.
this is not the end of our little interviews. It's great to have
It's
you this
another,
week.
it's another step on the journey.
Another step on the journey.
Great
Thank
being
you for being here this week. I don't know how much we've addressed questions from participants in our program, or just had a riff on things of interest to you and me. But hey,
That's it.
if this isn't what you want, you get the choice on YouTube to forward to the next video.
Absolutely.
If this was good, hit like, hit comment, and we'll make another one next time myself and John get together and run one of these programs. And if you have questions, stick them in the comments below. Have a great week.
Take care.
John and Conor here at IESE in Barcelona. Thank you for listening, watching, comments, likes, subscribes, all very welcome. Have a great week.
Have a great one.